We're thrilled to welcome back Bill Gramas tonight for his second program in a series of 8 here at the library. His first program, How to Repair a Busted America, will be on Bill's YouTube channel, as well as this program that you're about to see tonight. Bill Gramas is the founder, chairman of the board of directors, and CEO of Code Realm Corporation. He was a highly respected Wall Street software industry equity analyst with Gruntle & Company and LH Friend & Company. He began his 19-year Wall Street career with Mellon Bank and learned the technology and software industries while with Hembrecht & Quist and Donaldson, Lufkin & Jenrette. His public media appearances and presentations include CNN, NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, the Nightly Business Report, Barron's, Investors Business Daily, Red Herring, TheStreet.com, Radio Wall Street, as well as the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Society of Security Analysts. He received his MBA in finance from the George Washington University and his BA from Marquette. Tonight, he'll discuss the lingering global economic depression, and he'll tell us how can this be repaired. He explores the causes and offers a solution which will create a world-level playing field, including the United States. This informative program will help simplify the complex financial issues in our nation today. Afterwards, he'll be fielding some questions, and if you would please use this microphone to ask him, that would be great. Thank you, and enjoy the program.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Oak Brook Library. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. How in the world did we get into this mess? How in the world did our global economy get into this lingering economic depression that just will not go away? I don't know about you, but I want some answers. I'd like to know why this happened, how this happened. More importantly, I'd like a solution for this problem, and I'd like it fixed. Let's uncover the reasons for this mess and find a solution enabling our global economy to get back on its feet. Throughout history, countries and civilizations have accumulated insurmountable amounts of debt. Reasons causing these huge debt buildups have varied from war expenses, tulips, housing, financial excesses. The most successful way out of excess debt is a country's exports. Let's review the one-page playbook which every country on the planet knows and has successfully used getting themselves out of insurmountable debt. Every country's gross domestic product equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. That was supposed to be a joke. Gross domestic product equals consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Net exports are exports minus imports. Typically, a country's GDP stalls and declines when consumption demand evaporates, when corporate and other investment funding stops, when government spending reaches its acceptable society taste limits. That only leaves net exports. Imports may have reached a maximum capacity, and that only leaves exports. Exports are goods that are produced internally. For example, in the United States, we produce exports, products, goods and services that can be exported to other countries. Other countries pay for our goods and services with their currencies, and their currencies must be converted into our currency. I received a wonderful question a couple weeks ago from Mary right here in our library. She wanted to know where politics fit into this equation. So we're going to bring this in right here, right now, because this is where it fits into my presentation. Since that day, 2 airplanes have changed America's life. September 11th, 2001, in my humble opinion, began a depression in America. We began a depression, in my opinion, in around July 2001. We are still in this American depression today. I also believe that America entered a bear stock market in the fourth quarter of the year 2000. For today's presentation, I'm just giving you these overviews. These are topics that we're going to discuss in my next presentation at the end of September, titled Recession, Depression, Where Are We Now? But I wanted to bring this in for the political question, and in particular, I wanted to go step by step with consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. And I'm going to make a little grid here, and we're going to have the US, and we're going to give them a grade, and we're going to grade China, and we're going to give a very simple grade. So let's start with consumption. Consumption in America has been a mess. From 2001, consumption has fallen. I think it's safe to say we can put a minus sign in the consumption column for the United States of America. We have asked our citizens to take on insurmountable amounts of debt for things that citizens may or may not be able to accumulate, such as housing. We can see what we're doing with our American citizens, our fellow American citizens today. Many of them are being forced out of their homes and are becoming homeless. I think it's safe to say in the consumption column under the United States of America, we get a minus. China, on the other hand, has been employing its citizens. Their citizens are saving their money. China gets a simple plus in that column. Let's go to investment. How many people in the room, I'm assuming everybody in the room has a computer of some kind. Is that fair to, okay. Everybody knows Intel. Intel makes a chip for all your computers. Well, in 2003, Intel Corporation built a $9 billion plant to build more chips. Guess what? They built that plant in China. Not only is that a huge plus for China in the investment column, but it's a huge minus for the United States of America in the investment column. How many of you have a cell phone, a smartphone? How about Apple iPhone, Apple iPhones? Well, guess what? In the year 2009, Apple Computer built a $9 billion plant to make Apple iPhones. Guess what? They built it in China. Again, that's a huge plus in investment for China, but that's another big minus because America had lost that $9 billion plant. So it's a minus in the investment column for the US. How about government spending? I don't know about you, but I didn't get anything out of nearly $1 trillion of government spending to show up in my pocket. Did anybody else get any money out of government spending? Well, China is a communist country. Many of the companies that are run in China are government controlled. Government spending controls China. Well, again, we're looking at a minus in the America column for government spending, and we're looking at a huge plus in the China column for government spending. Well, let's go to net exports. Net exports equals exports minus imports. Well, net exports in the United States since the year 2001 have fallen off the cliff. And again, looking at China, net exports since the year 2001 have been booming. So I think it's safe to say in the 4 columns, consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports, we have a unanimous vote minus all the way across for US, plus all the way across for China. Let's review the one page that's in the one play playbook for troubled countries to get back on their feet out of insurmountable global debt. A troubled country can devalue its currency against other world currencies, especially against the world anchor currency or benchmark currency. The US dollar has been the benchmark currency or anchor currency since 1971 when Richard Nixon ended the gold standard. Prior to 1971, gold was the benchmark. Gold is not a currency, but it was the benchmark. All you'll see shortly, we're going to talk about that, you'll see that every country in the world benchmarked their currency to the price of gold. The devaluation of a country's currency makes their exported goods cheaper, less expensive to other countries that are going to purchase those goods. So let's take, I have my friend the wooden chair here. I don't know if all of you saw my first presentation, How to Repair a Busted America. I brought in the wooden chair. This is a very simple example. This chair is made of wood. Wood is wood. This costs $100 for the wood to make this chair. It doesn't matter if it's made in North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, China, New Zealand, Australia, or France. Wood is wood. To make the chair costs $100. If a chair is made in France, the finished good is price adjusted for the finished currency, and France, of course, is on the euro. Euro is approximately $1.23 to the US dollar. So this wooden chair, instead of being $100, is now $123. Well, you and I can go down the street and buy this wooden chair, the $100 version of the wooden chair, for $105. So if this chair is made in the United States, that manufacturer is making a $5 profit. If the chair is made in France, they're going to lose $20 from making the chair in France. So we're not going to see too many chairs made in France for sale down the street at the furniture store. When this chair is made in China, it gets currency adjusted at $15 per chair. $15.75 cents per dollar is the currency conversion for the China currency to the US dollar. So this $100 chair is now $15. The China manufacturer can sell that chair to all of us down the street. We buy it for $105. That China manufacturer is making a $90 profit. It doesn't matter if it's a wooden chair, if it's a laptop computer, if it's your iPhone, smartphone, or an F-16 fighter plane. Everything is 15 cents on the dollar. And in the wooden chair example, the manufacturer is making a $90 profit rather than a $5 profit, which is exactly why Intel and Apple Computer built their $9 billion factories each in China rather than in America. I get this question all the time, and it's about labor. China labor is cheap. That is a myth. You're watching too much television. Chinese labor is just like the wooden chair, is just like an F-16 fighter plane, a laptop computer, a cell phone. Everything is 15 cents on the dollar. Labor is also 15 cents on the dollar. So let's do some quick math. The average Chinese citizen worker made $4,000 last year. Converting it to 15.75 cents per US dollar converts that to $25,400 US equivalent. Well, an $8 an hour worker in the US makes $16,700 per year. So giving you the long math, instead of $8 an hour, that Chinese laborer is making $12.21 per hour, greater than the minimum wage in the United States of America. Once a debt-ridden country devalues its currency, it begins reaping the benefits from increasing its net exports. We just had the chair example. We talked about laptops, cell phones, F-16 fighter planes. China has been accumulating huge hordes of cash since this all began in 1994. It all began from Bill Clinton allowing the US-China Free Trade Agreement, and in that agreement, it allowed China to fix its currency back then at 12 cents per dollar. Today, after lots of yelling and screaming, the Chinese currency is up to a whopping 15.75 cents per dollar. This devaluation of currency is a proven method. Just a minute ago, we mentioned that every single country on the planet knows this one play in a one page of a playbook. Everybody knows this. Everybody is waiting in line to use this today. You all see what's going on in the world economy. But this method has limits and has horrible consequences, especially in a global economy. In my opinion, once a debt-ridden country that has devalued its currency reaches a debt break-even, or we'll get into in a minute, surplus deficit break-even, in my opinion, that is exactly when the currency must go back to a freely trading currency rather than fixed against the anchor currency, in this case the US dollar, and will be freely traded against other world currencies. This is the exact problem that must be addressed. A devalued country that has devalued its currency will oppose doing this, and they will fight to the death for having a freely traded currency once again. They would rather continue to reap the unnatural benefits that a devalued currency allows, namely trade surpluses and cash hoards. The unnatural currency devaluation will lead to imbalances throughout the rest of the world. Other world countries with freely trading currencies will become victims and find themselves in horrible debt problem of their own at expense of the devalued currencies benefiting beyond reason. These new debt problems are going to lead to society imbalances, and they're going to lead to problems such as tyranny, oppression, and revolution. Anthropologist Joseph Tainter wrote a book in 1988 titled The Collapse of Complex Societies. He reviewed 27 separate civilizations over a 4,500-year period. And he found factors explaining collapse, including resource depletion, natural disasters, invasions, economic distress, social dysfunction, religion, and all of our favorites, bureaucratic incompetence. Civilizations nearing collapse tend to offer its masses negative returns on inputs. Masses are not involved in societal participation. The masses will opt out of society. The masses will simply give up. My favorite, the masses will lay down their arms to conquerors. The masses will opt to follow any leader offering any kind of promise to a better way of life. How is this important? Has anyone read the Old Testament? God led the descendants of Abraham away from the Pharaoh, out of Egypt, away from tyranny and away from oppression. Our founding fathers built America against tyranny and against oppression. Soldiers have died for us for those two words, tyranny and oppression. The end resulting question we have to ask ourselves is, do we want a global economy, or do we want every country fending for themselves? If we want a global economy rather than everybody fending for themselves, there must be rules. These rules must have a smooth transition, getting the devalued currency for the country that had insurmountable a debt. Once they've reached a surplus deficit break even, these rules must force that country to revalue its currency and get it to freely trading along with all the other country currencies that are also freely trading. If it does not bring its currency back to freely trading, then repercussions and imbalances against other world countries and societies can become daunting. So let's look at three historic examples of countries that lingered their currency devaluation way beyond reason. We're going to look at three examples: 1919 France, 1994 China, and 2008 Iceland. World War I just ended. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in June 1919. Fighting essentially ended in November 1918. France was allowed to devalue its currency, the franc, against then the price of gold, which was the anchor currency benchmark. The purpose was to allow France to pay off its huge insurmountable war debt from World War I. The French franc, and I'm going to convert this to US dollars, so it goes from francs to gold, gold to dollars. So I'm going to give you the US dollar equivalent rather than the gold equivalent for simplicity. So the French franc was fairly constant US dollar equivalent of 17 to 19 cents per dollar from 1913 to mid-1919. The franc collapsed to 6 cents per dollar in late 1919, right after the Treaty of Versailles, which the Treaty of Versailles allowed France to devalue its currency. And the franc hovered at between 6 to 8 cents per US dollar until 1922. The German mark went from 20 cents per US dollar in early 1918 to essentially worthless in 1922. France's devalued currency allowed it to achieve its objective of paying its insurmountable World War I debt. But this devalued franc caused imbalances and caused harm to other countries and societies. Germany became an oppressed country, and the country fell under tyranny. The Hitler Society built up starting in the early 1920s, and we all know the horrible consequences that resulted in World War II. Tyranny, oppression, revolution. Those ugly three words surfaced in the Hitler Society. I believe that the economic ramifications that came from the French franc devaluation were a primary driver of the cause of this horrible outcome. In 1994, the United States of America foolishly allowed communist China to devalue its currency against the US dollar. A few minutes ago, we talked about the wooden chair. The Chinese currency was devalued to 12 cents per dollar in 1994, and after lots of yelling and screaming in the mid-2005, 2006, today the Chinese currency is a whopping 15.75 cents per US dollar. In my humble opinion, China achieved its objective of break even, getting out of its oppression somewhere around 1999. China was already an oppressed society, and it was able to dig itself out of problems, and that was the mission for the free trade agreement in 1994. Here we are 13 years later, and the China currency devaluation lingers on, and it's having enormous consequences and imbalances in present-day society. There are several countries in the world with some kind of economic collapse. These include recessions and depressions. These include tyranny, oppression, and revolution. Today, the US and other world countries allowing China's continued global devaluation must end now. This is a great place to begin the world rules for a global economy. Finally, we talk about 2008, Iceland was my third example. In 2008, we think we had it bad here in America. Iceland was broke. Iceland promptly devalued its currency, the kroner, from approximately 1.7 cents per US dollar to 0.7 cents per US dollar. That's an enormous devaluation. Where it continues to languish today. Iceland also reneged on a substantial amount of its debt, especially commercial bank debt to investors. Today, Iceland as a country is back on its feet. The currency devaluation was successful, but the repercussions and imbalances and the domino effects have yet to surface because this is all fresh. So we have yet to see the horrible imbalances that will come from the 2008 Iceland devaluation, but they will come. Let's look at the major players and participants that can impact the creation of this rule that I'm suggesting and the policing of the global economy, for policing the rule of ending devaluation, allowing a country to get its currency back on its feet to freely trading. So we're going to quickly hit on the IMF, the G20, the US Federal Reserve Board. We're going to briefly talk about today's world anchor currency, which is, of course, the US dollar. We're going to highlight the global GDP listing of countries, the global trade surpluses and deficits, and total global debt owed. So I want to give you a very simple understanding of each of these so you can follow with the conclusion. The International Monetary Fund is an organization of 188 countries worldwide. Its mission is to foster global monetary cooperation and to facilitate international trade. The Group of 20, G20, is a forum for international cooperation. 90% of the global GDP are members of the G20, 80% of global trade, and 2/3 of the world's population. The 20 members are Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Korea, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, United Kingdom, US, and the European Union. The Federal Reserve Board is, of course, the United States Federal Reserve Board, was created in 1913 for more flexible and more stable monetary policy. It has a twofold mission. One is full employment, the other is stable prices. Another way of saying no inflation, no deflation. Melissa mentioned my first presentation. This is my second presentation. My third one is coming up in the end of September. My fourth one, we haven't scheduled yet, is on the Federal Reserve Board. That's going to be a whole presentation. So for our purposes today, I'm just giving you a real surface highlight. As you can tell, I'm giving it a whole presentation, so there's a lot there. We mentioned the reserve currency or anchor currency, which is the US dollar. And why is that important? Because lots of commodities worldwide get priced, such as oil and gold, into US dollars. The foreign exchange reserves today, there's approximately 62.2% of world foreign exchange reserves are in US dollars. Unfortunately, that's down from 71% in 1999, 2000, and 2001. But the next closest percentage is the euro with 24.9%. So the US is clearly the world anchor currency. Let's look at total nominal GDP worldwide. At the end of year 2011 was $70 trillion. The sources of this are kind of interesting. Not only the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, also the World Bank. Very interesting, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency provides the World Factbook. So those are our three sources. The euro comprised 17.6 trillion out of the 70 trillion worldwide. U.S. 15.1 trillion. China 17.3. Japan 15.9. Brazil 2.5. United Kingdom 2.5. Canada 1.8 trillion. Mexico 1.2 trillion. And I put Israel in there just for reference, 243 billion. Breaking down further, the European Union for specific countries, Germany 3.6 trillion, France 2.8, Italy 2.2, Spain 1.5, and Greece 303 billion. There's approximately 190 total countries in the world that are part of the 70 trillion GDP worldwide. The largest 20 countries comprise 80%, or 56 trillion, and the remaining countries comprise the remaining 20%, 13 trillion. The CIA World Factbook also tracks the list of sovereign country current account balances, surpluses, and deficits. And at the end of the calendar year 2011, this is for the calendar year. This is not cumulative. This is just for the year 2011. These figures are fascinating. There's 192 total countries. 45 of them, or 23%, had surpluses of greater than $1 billion. 74 countries, or 39%, had deficits of greater than $1 billion. Let's quickly look at the greatest surplus countries. These are all in US dollars, billion converted. China, $281 billion surplus. Saudi Arabia, 151. Germany, 149. Japan, 123. And Russia, $91 billion US dollar converted. The greatest deficit countries, these figures are shocking. Turkey, 78 billion. Italy, 74. France, 72. UK, 66. Brazil, 64. India, 63. Spain, 61. Canada, 53. European Union combined, 33. Greece, 28 billion. The greatest deficit country, those you got a ballpark of all those. They're pretty similar. The greatest deficit country for the year 2011, you guessed it, United States of America, $600 billion. That's just for 2011. These are the surplus deficits that I was mentioning earlier in my presentation of when they reach break even, that's when you got to cut them off from devaluation. The CIA World Factbook also lists country's total public and private debt owed. This is the final one of our participants. This is a fuzzy area. I was not able to get a straight answer on this, but here's my best shot. There's 18 countries in the world with $1 trillion of debt or more. Here's a quick listing. Again, these are all converted, and these are all in trillions of US dollars. European Union, 16 trillion. US, 15.8 trillion. UK, 9 trillion. Japan, 2.4 trillion. Looking at specific EU countries, Germany, 4.7 trillion. France, 4.7, Italy, 2.3, Spain, 2.2, and Greece, 533 billion. The IMF is estimating that global GDP, that $70 trillion figure from a few minutes ago, is growing at approximately 1% per year. This is important because some of these countries are growing unfairly because their currencies are fixed against the anchor currency of the world, which is the US dollar. And they are not freely trading. They're not freely fluctuating. These countries are achieving growth unfairly and at the expense of other world countries. And they're having a domino effect of tyranny, oppression, and revolution. This is exactly where the solution lies. So now we'll hit the solution. The solution is for a global rule for how long a country can leave its currency devalued. Remember, devaluation is the one page in a one-page playbook that has been successful historically. But the rule must be enforced to force that devalued country to get back to freely floating currency once that country has reached a surplus deficit break-even. That means when it's reached its break-even, that means it's achieved its objective. And we want to have the world avoid future horrible consequences, such as what we discussed from the Treaty of Versailles, the franc being devalued and having an oppression effect on Germany. We want to avoid those horrible consequences. So we've got to go back to the rule, we've got to create a rule, and that should be the rule. Once a country reaches surplus deficit break even, it's got to be forced back to a freely trading currency. Some organization must create and enforce this rule. So we've reviewed several participants and players. The IMF, the G20, the Federal Reserve Board, the US dollar as the world anchor currency. We listed GDP by world countries. We listed surpluses and deficits. We listed total debt owed. Each of these participants, all of these separate countries, all have their self-interest at heart. So we can rule them out because of their self-interest. There is one that can and should be the world rule creator and enforcer. And in my opinion, that's the IMF. The IMF is in best position to initiate and enforce my suggested rule of allowing a currency devaluation, enabling a debt-ridden country a workable repair. The IMF is in the best position to monitor when the country reaches a surplus deficit break-even, and then the IMF is then in a great position to enforce and ensure a path for the devalued country to get back their currency to freely trading, ultimately avoiding a domino impact effect on other freely trading currency countries. If we plan on having a successful global economy rather than a global economy of rolling depressions, one country to the next, there must be acceptable rules for all. Devaluing a country's currency against world anchor currency is a proven method of getting a country out of its debt-ridden state. It increases net exports and it allows it to get out of debt. The problem is when a country stays the course well beyond its reasonable welcome, and this causes imbalances to other freely trading countries. The IMF must establish a world rule of surplus deficit break-even as an appropriate time to begin the unwinding process and get that devalued country back on its feet with freely trading currency. The IMF is in position to enforce this new proposed rule. I am for free trade, I am for freely trading currencies, and I am for countries offering their natural resources to other countries, enabling countries in the world to share each other's resources. I'm against countries lingering beyond reason a devalued currency, which will only bring that country benefits and bring imbalances and harm to a host of other domino-affected other countries that are playing fairly with their own freely trading currency. History has showed us the problem and ramifications. I'm offering a very simple solution for a better economic world. Thank you. Questions?
I want to say very well said, Bill, and you touched upon a lot of serious problems globally. What do you propose, since the U.S. is the anchor currency as the standard globally, and I agree with you that the free trade agreements that the Clinton administration got us on obviously is not mutually beneficial as initially intended. Having said that, because it's not mutually beneficial free trade, I don't know if we could say there's a breach somewhere along in the contractual agreement, but certainly it's not working as initially intended. Is there some solution that we can just, can we, without any repercussions, with just eliminating and just getting out of the free trade agreements and just saying this is not working as intended and just get out of them, drop them, cancel them, or impose maybe higher tariffs on the products that are, I think we're cutting our own throats. We need to tariff the products that are being imported here in the United States at a higher tax level and tariff them higher. Or, maybe, I don't want to say go to the extreme of economic sanctions with our allies and with other countries, but to equalize the currency in making it fair and equitable and stabilizing the global currency and some kind of global monetary reform. As you said, certainly getting the International Monetary Fund to do what they're supposed to do and regulating that as well. Is there some multiple aspects to as a solution, long-term solution with increased tariffs and possibly economic sanctions to have some kind of remedy for this?
Yeah. You asked several great questions, I'll try and hit them. In 1994, Bill Clinton signed the U.S.-China Free Trade Agreement. And in my opinion, I don't know if you saw my first presentation, I discussed that from a domestic standpoint, and the solution is tariffs will not work, but ending the free trade agreement has to be ended, not tariffs. You've got to end the free trade agreements domestically from the U.S., and that comes from the executive branch. That's got to be a presidential order. So we are now on our third president that has failed miserably, starting with Clinton, then into Bush, now we're into the third guy. And none of them have addressed this issue. I mentioned here tonight that, in my opinion, China got out of its oppression somewhere around 1999. Here we are 13 years later, and this free trade agreement is still alive and active. So from a domestic standpoint, which I addressed in my first presentation, the U.S. has to stand up on its own 2 feet and force China to end the free trade agreement. And more importantly, the U.S. has to force China to get its currency to a freely trading currency. And last time I discussed, in my opinion, the Chinese currency, which is 15.75 cents per dollar. We use the chair example. In my opinion, it's $1.11 to the US dollar. So that's an enormous gap. That's not going to be a 1 day or 1 year fix. My proposal was a 5-year fix, 50% increase every year for 5 years. Tonight we talked about a global discussion, and the reason why I brought up all the participants is I was trying to show everybody's got their self-interest, and I was trying to show that there are many countries in some form of economic recession or depression, tyranny and oppression, and those countries are all waiting in line to devalue their currency against the US dollar. And Iceland was a modern example, 2008. You know, they, bam, did it right away. They weren't waiting in line. And they succeeded. Every world country knows this solution. Citizens in the United States may not know the solution, but believe me, every country knows the solution. And there's got to be a rule set up for how long you can linger, what's reasonable. So we're going back to China, and maybe it was reasonable to allow a currency devaluation from 1994 to 1999. Let's get China back on its feet. But here we are 13 years later. It's way beyond reason. We're way over the line, and it's having horrible repercussions on other countries in the world. It's having a domino effect on all other countries. You see what's going on in Europe. You see what's going on in the Middle East. I mean, these aren't coincidences. These are all results of currency imbalances. These aren't hand wars and missile wars. They're dollar bill wars. And the United States is losing miserably because our chiefs have made bad decisions. So getting back to your question earlier, Congress in the past 8 years has passed twice, I believe it was 2006 and again in 2008, passed a 25% tariff on all Chinese imported goods coming through Long Beach and San Pedro ports. None of them have been enforced. A congressional act on this is worthless. This has got to be an executive order. An executive order does not come through Congress. Unfortunately, Congress is not involved. This is a congressional or a presidential order, and we just have not had a president to stand up and say, enough, this is over.
Enough is enough, right?
Yeah. And if you like, I hit on Chinese labor and the out of balance for Chinese labor. Bill Clinton had a great idea at the end of the 1990s. Maybe Americans are too smart to be putting a circuit on a circuit board. Well, are Americans too smart to be putting a circuit on a circuit board? Are all Americans going to go to MIT and work at NASA? No, that's not going to happen. And people in America have to work. They have to be able to provide for themselves. So maybe some people working to put a circuit on an Intel circuit board, maybe Intel should build that plant in Utah or Arizona rather than in China. Maybe Apple Computer should have put that plant in Wyoming or Nevada rather than in China.
The problem, I suppose, is multifactorial, with a lot of these companies like British Petroleum, being from England, incorporated in England and selling their product here and having their own banks offshore and funneling a lot of their profits where they're not paying their share of tax revenue. And we have a lot of these companies that are, selling their products or service here in the United States. They're not incorporated here, and they're laundering their profits to offshore banks.
Yeah, that topic is expatriated funds. So Intel, we talked about the Intel plant from 2003. Intel generates revenue and generates profits from that plant in China. And Intel is sitting on gobs of cash that's sitting in China. And it's called expatriated funds because Intel cannot bring those dollars back to the United States. And when they bring those dollars back to the United States, they're going to end up paying a huge tax. And large companies are hoping they'll get a tax holiday. Well, is that appropriate? Is having a tax holiday appropriate? I'm not sure it's appropriate either.
Just recently, with England, Standard Chartered Bank was fined heavily, and they claimed they didn't know they were laundering billions of dollars. It was Al Qaeda's money, and then they came out and said, we didn't know, and they settled to pay a big fine, and how can they not know where that money's coming from, and so it's not just China. We have our own ally that is, is contributing to the problem.
Yeah, sorry.
I think another big segment of the problem, and you mentioned it about not being able to, or people being not smart enough to make a circuit board or too smart to make a circuit board. I think that's part of our educational system. We're not training people to be production workers at all. And we've come up to the situation where we think that every kid needs to go to some exclusive 4-year college and study philosophy and biology and things like that. And we don't have the people to fill these plants. When they build these $9 billion plants, we can't supply production workers from Caterpillar right now. Cannot fill their ranks because there aren't enough welders trained in the United States. And so as a result, they're looking overseas for production. And
America is built on the bottom up. That means the lowest person has to be working. The guy that goes to MIT to work at NASA, he's at the other end of the chain. He's the top. We got to have the people on the bottom working, earning an income, being able to buy their own food, being able to buy their own house, being able to buy their own car. That's how America works. And whether it's putting a circuit on a circuit board or Caterpillar having a welder, are you joking me? Caterpillar can't find a welder?
that's right.
Are you joking? What does it take, 3 minutes to have someone learn how to be a welder?
No, there's more training to it than that. For
3 hours? Years? You got to be kidding me. If I was Caterpillar, I'd start hiring kids at high school level and teach them how to be welders. If Caterpillar is yelling that they don't have any welders, there's lots of people that are unemployed that can spend 3 years learning how to be welders. They're not going to become a NASA rocket scientist at MIT. You joking me that Caterpillar can't find workers?
That's what they say.
They're a farce.
Bill, I'm Joe Pontieri. I've been going to China since the mid-'80s. And I've watched China grow from everybody wearing mild jackets and 50 million bicycles jamming the streets. And
Now they have BMWs.
yeah, to now everybody driving BMWs, and not everybody, but there are certainly more cars than there has ever been. And they're building 18 or 20 million vehicles in China. They're the largest manufacturer of automobiles in the world as a country. So I kind of liken this two ways. Is we thought we were all going to learn Japanese in 1981 because we taught the Japanese how to make cars after the Second World War and gave them lean manufacturing, and they came over here, invested their money in the U.S., and we were very thankful that they did. Then the real estate devalued, they lost lots of money in real estate, and businesses devalued, and they bought. And China matured, wages went up, people wanted to live like we live. Now, in Japan, and now you see in China the same thing. You have 130 million people migrate from northern and central China to southern China to work. And one of my companies happens to have a factory in China. So I've been there 9 times in the last 2 years. So, and these people are living in dormitories like our grandparents lived when they migrated from Italy or England or wherever they came from. And so, you know, we're stuck in a time and place where China is competitive because we've sent all our technology there. Everybody's making, the General Motors factory in Shanghai looks just like the General Motors factory in Detroit. The Ford factory looks exactly the same. They're all automated with robots, and the technology is all Western technology, either from Germany, Japan, or the US. So,
but you have to go back to what I addressed tonight and what I addressed in the first topic, first presentation, which I don't think you were here. That's all right. Why is this happening? It's happening because Chinese currency is 15 cents on the dollar. It's at 15 cents on the dollar because of the 1994 Bill Clinton Free Trade Agreement, China-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. That is the only reason that China is getting those factories built in China, because it's 15 cents on the dollar. That has to end. Those are unnatural benefits. One of my favorite economists is Milton Friedman. Tyranny and Oppression, Capitalism and Freedom. He's got some wonderful books, even as far back into the 1950s. And they discuss this, they warn us, great economists warn us as far back as the 1950s, if the world ever goes off the gold standard and goes to freely fluctuating currencies, the world must not allow countries to peg their currencies against the anchor currency. So the modern example is the Chinese at 15 cents per US dollar. The US dollar is the anchor currency. That is the problem. That is causing massive imbalances throughout the whole world. It's causing massive imbalances right here. Unfortunately, I didn't bring this up, and I'm going to bring it up now. Unfortunately, we are the anchor currency. And unfortunately, as the anchor currency, we can talk all we want about devaluing the US dollar. But as the anchor currency, there is no devaluation. There is no appreciation. We are the suckers. No matter what happens, we're at the whims of the other countries that force the devaluation. So we're the losers every time. That's the raw part of the deal of being the anchor currency. But we gave this ourselves. We brought this on ourselves. 1994 Free Trade Agreement. Tom pointed out earlier that there were several free trade agreements in the 1990s. They may have had benefits at their time. Their time is way overdue. and they must end. And the domino effects that we're seeing, the repercussions, these are trickle-down domino effects. And you know, I go back to those three ugly words: tyranny, oppression, revolution. We're seeing this all over the globe. We're seeing it right here at home. And for companies like Caterpillar saying they can't find a welder, are you joking me?
Not just Caterpillar, it's General Motors, it's Ford. It's
If I was running Caterpillar, I'd start finding kids at high school and start training them to learn how to be a welder or whatever they're...
You gotta go to college, not.
No, you don't need to go to college to be a
No, I know
welder.
they don't, but that's the whole.
Mindset. Yes, the mindset. In certain parts of the country, not everywhere.
Well, you know, one of my favorite, I didn't even bring this up, but one of my favorites as a California resident, you know, state of California imports pickers for strawberry season. And they come and they go up to Watsonville and they're picking strawberries and blueberries and lettuce and whatever they're picking. And they come up from Mexico and they live in dormitories in Watsonville and they pick whatever they're picking. Well, you know what? State of California can import from some foreign country like Illinois or Michigan, places where people work with their hands in a machine shop or a car factory. There's no more machine shops. There are no more car factories. Well, you know what? State of Illinois or state of Michigan can bus thousands of Illinois and Michigan former factory workers, and they can go to Watsonville and they can pick strawberries for the season. Instead of having someone from Mexico come up and live in the dormitories in Watsonville, they can have someone from Michigan or Illinois go there and pick strawberries for the season, and then the state of Illinois or Michigan can bus them back when the season's over. You know, those people didn't go to MIT to learn rocket science.
It's a new world. You think that they're willing to go and work for the same wages?
I don't know. You know, I don't know. Ask someone who used to work.
The wages we're paying these imported laborers are more than welfare would pay and unemployment would pay people?
You know, that's a good question, and I don't know if Watsonville strawberry farms are paying $8 an hour or $10 an hour. I don't know how they're paying, but you know what? Someone can figure it out. And someone can make it so that it's worth the while of a car worker or a machine tool worker to go there for the season to pick, you know? Sorry. Yeah.
This is a very basic question.
Yeah.
I don't know much about economics.
Oh, yeah.
But
Me neither.
What I'm saying is, I'm asking, you're saying that the Chinese, their currency is pegged at 15 cents.
Per US dollar.
US dollar.
Yes.
And also, England's is at 1.23 per US dollar. Now,
Well, the pound is a dollar. Sarunas, is it what, $1.56?
No,
What's the pound?
$1.23 this morning.
No, that's the euro. What's the pound?
Yeah, well, $1.51.
51. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Well, are you saying then that fluctuates, but the
Yep.
Chinese does not?
Yep. The Chinese is fixed to the US dollar. So if the US dollar is 80 cents to a basket of goods, the Chinese currency is still 15 cents on that 80 cents. If the US dollar is $1,
Yes.
the Chinese currency is 15 cents, 15.75 cents per US dollar.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if the US dollar goes up or down, it's still 15.75 cents per dollar. It doesn't matter. A dollar, to them it's pegged, it's fixed. So then you go.
The world has to float.
Well, many of the countries in the rest of the world float, such as the euro, such as the pound, such as the U.S. dollar, Swiss franc, Canada.
Well, that
You know.
isn't fair, is it?
No, it's not. And the reason why we're talking about this is because devaluation, or in this exact case, China pegging to the US dollar at 15.75, that is devaluation.
Yes.
That is exactly what that is. I'm sorry, I thought everyone got that.
Well, I probably everybody else did, but
No, that's exactly what that is. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. And the argument I'm making is that 15.75 cents per dollar must get and stand on its own 2 feet.
Yeah.
And
They're
it,
allowed to fluctuate.
right. So the Chinese currency is 15 cents per US dollar. In my humble opinion, by my math, the Chinese currency, it should be $1.11 to the US dollar.
Yeah. Well,
That's way out of whack.
why are all these countries putting up with that? Why are they so apathetic? Why don't
Well, this is what I'm arguing for in this paper, and all these countries have their own self-interest, and that's why I gave those boring lists about world GDP, surpluses and deficits, total debt owed. Every single one of those countries has their own self-interest at heart. So this is why I'm picking on the International Monetary Fund. The IMF is not a country. It's an organization. They have
made up of various countries?
188 countries, and they're in a position to step up and enforce a rule. They're in the position to create a rule and enforce a rule.
Yeah, but they're not doing it because they're made up of all these individual countries who are looking after their own self-interest.
Well, no, the IMF has a board. The G20 is exactly what you're talking about. They're made up of individual countries made up of self-interest, whereas the IMF has a different motto, and they actually have a board, and they have actual workers, smart people.
Well, what nationality are they? Are they from every country or?
Sarunas, they're in Geneva, right? IMF is in Geneva? Do you know? I think they're in
Oh, and it's comprised of various
members.
members. And
Right.
these members, don't they come from individual countries? Won't they be looking after the self-interests of their own countries?
Well, that's the G20. The G20 actually has members. They meet as members. They have individual participants from each country, U.S., Canada, Mexico.
But
Each
IMF
sent.
is
No, it's not like that. IMF has an organization, and they run the show. They don't have all the members of individual countries. That's the G20 that has the
Well,
individual.
what makes you think that the IMF could do that?
They're kind of an independent body, and they're in a position to take a suggestion like mine and make it into a rule.
Well, why would they? What benefit would it be for them?
Well, that's their motto, is to enable world free trade. And IMF clearly knows that the world is in a mess.
Yeah, well, we all know that, don't we?
Yeah.
But we're all apathetic. We're not doing anything. We're not coming out and doing anything. We're also sort of.
Well, we are. I mean, we're here right now.
Yeah, we are, but most of America is very apathetic. They don't go. I'm okay.
I don't know if it's apathetic or they just don't know.
Oh, well, maybe.
They
They could find out.
That's right.
The question is, how do you get on the board? How do you get on the board? Is this IMF?
I don't know.
Are they looking for people to be on the board?
What a mess.
What would be the response from all those companies that have huge investments in China if the currency were allowed to flow freely?
They wouldn't be happy. You know, Intel and Apple.
They are the cause of the inaction.
I don't know if they're the cause of the inaction. They clearly wouldn't be happy because they're going to watch that $9 billion plant decrease in value. And you know, I believe it's appropriate to say they have already decreased in value, and I believe it's appropriate to say that they are writing off those amortization schedules for factory and equipment. And I don't know the life. This is an accounting question, but the life of a factory, plant, and equipment in China, I think the U.S. is 8 years. Depreciation. I don't know if it's 8 years or 10 years. I don't know what the life is in China. Is it 8 years? Okay, so there you go. So you know they're probably almost fully written off by now. And as a matter of fact, I read somewhere that Intel is actually building a $9 billion plant in Utah and another one in Arizona. But I just read that. I don't know if that's a fact.
I just wondered if they were exerting a huge amount of pressure to keep the United States from, getting out of the free trade agreements because of the devastating effect it would have on their investments.
I'm sure they have some kind of voice I'm sure. But you know what? If they're on an amortization schedule and they're almost completely written off, you know, I would think that voice is diminishing. Sorry.
What or who caused the change in China's policy of raising their valuation from 12 to 15.7?
You know, there was a lot of yelling and screaming 2005, 6, 7, 8 by U.S. Congress.
Just the U.S. Congress?
Yeah.
The rest
And
of the world had nothing to do with this?
you know, the rest of the world, I don't know. I don't know what the rest of the world was saying. But you know, certainly, I think it was 2006 and 2008. There were two separate congressional bills that were passed for 25% tariffs on Chinese imports, and I believe all three presidential staffs have been yelling and screaming all the way back to the late 1990s with no success. I know that there's been some publicity in the last couple months of the current administration yelling and screaming against China to try to get their currency back on its feet. But
what clout does the rest of the world have in order to get China to raise their valuation? Do we have any clout? Do we have anything? Is it just a matter of...
Absolutely. And I discussed this in the first presentation. And my opinion is from today we talked about the world, the global response. Last time I talked about just the U.S. response. And in my opinion, from the U.S. response, the U.S. has to say, look, we've got to be on a 5-year plan. We got to have that currency appreciate 50% a year. At the end of 5 years, you're going to be up to $1.11. $1.14 is the actual math. And then we'll have it freely float. And you know what? If your currency, China, if you do not follow the 50% per year inflate, we're going to do it for you, and we're going to assign a new currency for you, and we're going to use that new currency for you, and we're no longer going to acknowledge your old currency. And here's your new currency, and if you don't like it, go somewhere else. Now, today we're talking about the world participation. And the reason why I discussed tyranny, oppression, revolution, this is abundant in the world. There are recessions and depressions all over the world. And these are because these other countries are domino affected from a country like China that has fixed currency against the US dollar. It's a big domino effect.
Do you feel these other countries are supporting what you just said the United States wants?
I would be shocked if every single country on the planet didn't line up behind this. I would be shocked. It's in everybody's best interest. You know, when the world ended the gold standard in 1971, Richard Nixon ended the gold standard, we were warned. You know, great economists warned us. You cannot let countries peg currencies against the anchor currency because it's going to cause imbalances. We were warned. And the reason why countries have gone through the peg process, pegging their currencies against the dollar, which is the anchor currency, is because countries have accumulated insurmountable amounts of debt. And if you go back to the early equation that I gave you, GDP equals consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Well, when a country's in trouble, their consumers cannot spend. We Americans, our fellow consumers are tapped out. Investment. Our companies are taking their money and building plants and equipment in other countries. You know, I went through my grid earlier, you know, minus for US, minus for US. Government spending, well, you know, gee, government spending is a great idea, but if there's no revenue coming in, if consumers are not working, consumers don't even have to file a tax return. You know, if a consumer is not working, they're not going to be generating any income. They're not going to be paying any taxes. In my last presentation, I projected that there's 44 million unemployed Americans. And I used an average salary of $50,000 per person. That's $8.2 trillion of lost income, wages. At 30 to 35% tax rate, the government should be watching this video. They should be paying attention. That's $600 to $700 billion per year of lost tax revenue for the US government. 600 to 700 billion per year lost. You know, I think the government is focused on the wrong problems. They're focused on sideshows. You know, who pays how much tax? You know, 2% more, you know, 35% or 37%. They're focused on the wrong problems. They're not even in the right ballpark. When we have 44 million people that are not working, and that adds up to net 600 to 700 billion per year of no tax revenue, boy, if I was working in the government, I'd be paying attention to this. I'd want those 44 million people working. And if it means sending some guys from Illinois and Michigan to pick strawberries and lettuce in Watsonville, you know, and if I was a state of Michigan or Illinois, I'd figure out some way to get those people on a bus over there and import them to California to pick some strawberries. And if they're working with their hands anyway, well, you know, they're not building any cars, they're not building any sheet metal, you know, that's a hand working job. You know, those aren't MIT NASA scientists.
You know, I was curious from a point of logistics when Clinton signed off on all the free trade agreements and got us in this big mess with China. Being that it obviously affects the global market, didn't the IMF have a position to say this is not in the best interest of the world's free trade, it's not going to work? and to nip it in the bud at that point in time and to intervene because that's part of their, as a regulatory agency of the, world.
So you're asking a great question. Did somebody look down the road?
Or someone that was asleep at the helm there?
Yeah, and well, you know how this works. I mean, did somebody look down the road 20 years and say, well, what if this happens? Then we're going to be in this horrible mess. Instead of looking at the low road, they're looking at the high road. Well, everything's going to be great.
In other words, having some fail-safe mechanisms as in the IMF to...
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with the euro. I mean, the euro in 1999 was, such a wonderful thing. Well, did anybody figure out that countries that were part of the euro has no central government. They've got, 17 countries in the euro? Is it 17? That are independently governed, but they're all on the same currency. So that means that countries that get in trouble cannot devalue their currency because they don't have a currency. And in the United States, if a state like Illinois or Florida gets in trouble, well, they're going to get subsidized out, because the United States has a centralized government. We have a centralized currency, but more importantly, we have a centralized government, and that centralized government is going to help the states that are in trouble. Whereas in the euro, the countries that get in trouble have no recourse. They're stuck. There's no way to devalue their currency, and that's exactly why I spent time on this presentation. Devaluing the currency is the only proven method that works. Sorry, that's the way it is. It's proven and it works. And the euro countries cannot devalue themselves. And that's why I listed, I mentioned in each case GDP, surpluses and deficits, and total debt owed. That's why I broke out the euro countries, because there's plenty of them that are in a mess.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Would we have world chaos if we lowered the benchmark?
The US dollar? Not really, because the US dollar is, the US dollar is the benchmark, and whether you lower or raise the benchmark, everything else goes with it. So if the US dollar is $1,
We would lower that, the Chinese would be up here a little higher, and that dollar...
no, the 15 cents is still 15 cents. It doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't matter if the dollar is $1 or if the dollar is 80 cents. It's still 15 cents on the 80 cents. So what's 15, any mathematicians here? 15 cents on 80 cents is, what is that, like, huh?
It's a sixth.
Okay, there you go. So 12.5 cents. So it just, whether it goes up or down, doesn't affect it. So it's good that, there are other countries that have freely floating currencies, such as...
What about all the billions and billions of dollars that we owe China? Because they're continuing to loan to us,
Yeah,
and we're taking their loans. And,
Yeah. Yeah,
But we're going to have to pay that back at whatever level the currency is.
yeah, yeah. And if you want to go down that path, we can talk about the physical reserve of gold. And guess what? I don't know if it's 80% or 90% of the world physical gold reserves are right here on the island of Manhattan. 80 feet below ground in bedrock. They're in cages. So if you want to go down that path and play that game, guess who has the physical gold? It's right here. And whether it's China's gold or Japan's gold or Switzerland's gold, guess what? It's right in Manhattan. You know, come and get it. But yeah, you're exactly right. And that's part of the problem. We're in this vicious cycle that has to be broken. You know, so why does the U.S. owe all this money to China? It goes back to the currency. You know, you got to dig down deep. You know, what's the cause? What's causing this? It's you know, you keep on digging. It's the currency. And if you want to nip this down all the way down at the bottom, that's where you got to fix. That's where the fix has to come in. You know, the superfluous part is someone going to pay 35 or 37% on taxes? You know, that's not even. Yeah, that's not even what we should be looking at. The people that are talking about the taxes they're not even in the right ballgame. They're talking about the wrong things.
China right now, though, is king of the hill, and you're not about to get them to change the devaluation. They've got,
Oh, no?
They've got these big stockpiles of cash that you mentioned that.
Yeah?
What force is there that's going to make them do this and that?
Well, in my first presentation, my solution was the U.S., from the U.S. standpoint, has to get China to inflate their currency to get it freely trading. And I suggested earlier that if China doesn't voluntarily do it, we have to issue them a new currency that will revalue 50% increase per year over 5 years. There's the 5-year plan. Let's get this currency to a freely trading currency so it can stand up on its own 2 feet. Tonight I'm talking about the global effects, and I'm listing all the countries in the world that are in some form of recession, depression, trade deficits, huge amounts of debt owed. It's in the best interest of every single one of these countries. And I was shocked. It's not 5 or 6. Out of the 190, 188 that are IMF members, I think it was like 145 of them that are in trouble. You know, so it's not, you know, so it's in everybody's best interest. And the reason, you know, the reason why I gave this presentation is because there's a reason why this is all happening. And if you dig down, the answer is it's because of the currency. It goes back to fixed currency. And it's because countries have allowed their currency to be devalued beyond a reasonable time. And my answer is, what's the reasonable time? Once they reach surplus, deficit, break even, that's it. You're off the gravy train. And someone's got to set up that rule, and someone's got to enforce that rule. And I think the IMF is in position to set up and enforce that rule. So that was my suggestion.
Do you have any support in Washington for these ideas? No, you don't know. Nobody's promoting this from Washington. Just, this is your own idea. And you're going to take it to Washington.
When I wrote my Unfix the Yuan paper in 2009, I tried to find some economists to review it. You know, I went to the likely sources, you know, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Stanford, Berkeley. You know, went to my alma maters. I think the closest thing I could find was a guy who knew Canada currency, but that was about it. You know, I reviewed the economics and finance departments. This paper I actually just finished 4 days ago, for tonight's topic. So if anybody would like the paper, you know, we can get a sheet of paper and you can leave your email address and I'll email it over. But this is fresh off the press. And I wrote it for, tonight's presentation. And there'll be another one for recession, depression in September.
Can you read me out of the one you did a week ago, or whenever you did the other one?
2009, sure, yeah, yeah.
No, I was gonna say, why do we even need to wait 5 years if in fact the IMF is to do the job it's intended to do, and China has reached that critical threshold of surplus deficit threshold wherever that point is, why can't the World Bank and the global economy and IMF say, hey, you have no choice, we don't recognize you, this fixed price anymore, you have to.
The Chinese currency is so far out of whack. It is not a 1-year fix or a 2-year fix. A 5-year fix would be 50% per year revaluation.
Displace immediate demand, immediate.
If you had more than 50% per year, you'd have a horrible depression worldwide, much worse than now. So you got to have a gradual stage-in process. I picked 5 years, 50% per year. That seemed reasonable to me. I think if it was 1 or 2 years, that would turn into a horrible, horrible worldwide depression. And we don't need any more worldwide depressions. But that was the intention was, you got to get the countries that are fixed, you got to get them on their own 2 feet.
Are there other countries that are fixed?
Well, we talked about Iceland. Iceland is, and yeah, there are others. And Iceland is a more recent example. And I'm sure there's going to be ugly ramifications that surface from that. We just don't know what they are yet.
Isn't Argentina fixed for the US dollar too?
Brazil used to be fixed. Now they're trying on their own. They're doing much better. They still have a huge amount of debt owed. Deficits. But they're trying. And the intention is, the whole idea behind devaluation is if a country's in insurmountable debt, we got to get them to a path of being able to be back on their own feet. And devaluation is the only real proven method that works.
All these second world countries, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, have devaluation. Back in the 80s, I had a plant in Brazil, we were having 25-30% devaluation.
Yeah.
With the currency, it's very common.
Yeah. But you have to have an end game. You have to have, what's the mission? How long is it going to last? And you got to have a solution. And my solution offered is, when a country reaches surplus, deficit, break even, bam, that's the answer. That's what you're achieving. That's what you want to achieve is break even. And then you've achieved your objective, and then it's time to get the currency back on its own. You don't want to have a lingering 13 years later, China, in my opinion, 1999 achieved their objective. Here we are 13 years later, we're still in the same mess. Nothing has improved. It's like the U.S. housing. U.S. housing is my, out of 8 topics, I think it's the 7th topic. So that's coming up in a while. But it's like housing. I mean, the U.S. has a lingering housing depression that is going nowhere. It's not being fixed. And here we are 6 years later, and it's still the same. It's not on a path to fixing. You got to have a path to repair. So when I get to the housing discussion, I'll give you my housing solution. But back to currency devaluation, it works. But you have to have an end game, and it's got to be reasonable. You know, I believe the surplus deficit break even is the reasonable point. Because anything beyond that has horrible repercussions, domino effects, and you don't want to have the domino effects. So that's why I brought up those examples: 1919 France, 1994 China, 2008 Iceland. I think we only have a couple more minutes, so yeah. What, any more, couple more questions, or how are we doing? No?
Finished. It's very interesting.
Okay, thank you.